Toyota has stepped in the game with the biggest SUVs on the market with the Grand Highlander, which is just unveiled tonight. I think there is something really interesting going on here with this design, specifically when you compare it to the Highlander, the normal Highlander. I'm going to show you that when we jump into Photoshop and compare the two models side by side in the front side and rear, and also, of course, we need to talk about the interior as well. Very nice touch in the interior on this new Highlander. More on that a little later in the video. First of all, let's talk about the spec and tech here. What is the Highlander powered by, first of all? So you get three engine options to choose from. And the first one, the base, is the 2.4 liter turbo 4-cylinder. Toyota will also offer a 2.5 liter hybrid package as the next step up. And these can both be had with either front or all-wheel drive options. However, you can only get the Hybrid Max as all-wheel drive. And the Hybrid Max is the top-of-the-line gas-electric drivetrain. It makes an impressive 362 horses and 400 pound-feet of torque. It's a big beast, this thing. But then again, you also need that much power if you want to move this big 3-row SUV. There's no info on the specs on the two lower powertrains yet. I guess that will come later this summer. A dual exhaust is an option for the Hybrid Max powertrain, which you obviously want to get because it looks really good having those two pipes in the rear. You also have different lower front and rear bumpers, and you can equip it with 20-inch wheels, which in my opinion look, even 20-inch look a little small on this. I think 22s would look pretty decent on this type of package in these type of proportions. In the interior, we have a 12.3-inch infotainment touchscreen as standard on all Grand Highlander models for 2024, and a wireless charger is integrated in the center console. And you also have a bunch of USB ports located throughout the 3 rows in the interior, and the second row passengers also have their own climate control options, so that's pretty cool. It feels like a luxury vehicle. I'm starting to feel like it's morphing. Toyota and Lexus are morphing in together more and more, specifically with the high-end Toyota vehicles. They feel almost like Lexuses these days. So let's jump into Photoshop here and let me show you what's going on with the Highlander. And I'm gonna compare it to the Grand Highlander here on the left side. Then you have the normal Highlander right here on the right side. So what I want to show you here is something really cool that I think has been around for a while, but it's coming back now. And that is when you have, well, I've talked about this before, when you have the big brother, it's supposed to be more stately and less fun. It's a little bit more serious because we're grown up now and we take things very seriously, and that is supposed to be represented in the design. And I think this Grand Highlander does this really, really well, because look at this, these lines. It's nothing, you know, Toyota-like from their smaller models. This is super stately, super serious, angles everywhere, and very squarish proportions in this big 3-row SUV. And you also have this grille that looks more like it has some inspiration from the 4Runner. And speaking of grille sizes, I know we complain a lot about BMW. I think that more has to do with the shape of the grille and not the size. And I think this is more evidence of that, because this is a huge grille in the front end, but it doesn't look oversized for this package because it fits everything else in the front end. We have the same angle here, and the same angle coming back in the side graphics in the front end. And this creates a very congruent design in the front end. This is what BMW is lacking, for example, and that's why their grills look way oversized in the front end, comparing it to, for example, this Grand Highlander. But looking at it here and comparing this to the normal Highlander, this definitely has a lot more funky lines and organic soft curvatures in it, as you can clearly see. Specifically, look at this fender here that goes in almost like a Toyota Supra fender in the SUV of the Highlander. And then we have different treatments in the front end. The grille is not as serious. It doesn't have this angry or stately face to it like we have in the Highlander. This can have a little bit more fun, and the designers can play around a little bit more with curvatures and not just sketch out a car using a ruler like they did on the Grand Highlander, which by the way, I think is the correct way to design a big 3-row SUV. Looking at it from a side view, we see this even more here. Just look at how squarish this is, and you also have this D-pillar back here being very thick and parallel as well, and we have a vertical front end of the graphics, and then the hood almost goes straight out from the A-pillar, and the top of the greenhouse also almost straight back. Perfect proportions for this type of SUV, where you have the normal Highlander, again, being a little bit more playful. You can see that specifically this treatment, this feels more luxurious and it feels more refined when it comes to design of the D-pillar specifically, comparing it to the normal Highlander on the right side here. Now, looking at the rear view, this reminds me a little bit of the pre-facelift BMW X5, and that is not a bad thing. I think that looks really good, and it also looks pretty decent here on the Grand Highlander in the rear end. But look at the lines here, nothing over stylized. They were very careful with adding too many lines onto this design because it is the big brother. I do like this chamfer though. We have one subtle chamfer going in the D-pillar here, and then this also creates a chamfer for the rear window here on each side of the window, and it also creates a chamfer for the taillight in this section. So I think this is a very important little detail in the surfacing of the car that creates a more quality feel for the rear end design, in addition to these graphics in the taillight that also suits this type of package, being pretty geometrical when you look at them, and specifically comparing it to the, for example, the outline of the normal Highlander on this side feels a lot more organic, and everything here almost goes into the melted cheese philosophy, in my opinion, specifically looking at it at this point. But we do have a pretty sharp edge here that kind of breaks the melted cheese design up, and you can see that this is the Hybrid Max with the dual exhaust pipes, and this looks like these are probably the 20-inch wheels, which I think look a little too small for this size of car. So let's see what we can do here. If we can just copy these, something like that, and then just make them a little bigger in the front and in the rear, and then also increase the rim size by a couple of inches. So these would probably be 22-inch wheels, which I think looks very good on this design. These look very comfortable, but they don't look like they fill out the wheelhouses the way I personally want. I think this looks a little better. So looking at the interior, Toyota, I think, are doing great with interiors. I think they've stepped it up from this plasticky, low quality feel that they had a few years back. This looks almost retro to me, this interior, because we have this curvature on the gauge cluster, nicely done, and this looks like this could be from the early 2000s, but what gives it away being a modern car is obviously this gorgeous gauge cluster that we have deep in the dash, looking really cool. And I'm also glad that Toyota decided to take this restraining of their designs to the interior as well, and just have it be a square on the gauge, on the infotainment screen. Usually what they do is what they do here. You have a good example of that right here, with a lot of curvatures and things going on and sticking out edges. There's a triangle, for example, on the right side of the infotainment screen on the normal Highlander, but here they decided to dial it back a little bit, keep it in line with the exterior design, and I think they did a fantastic job on the interior of the Grand Highlander. It looks clean, it looks retro, and this is exactly what I want to see in new interiors. I think this is an interior that I would rather sit in than a lot of new Mercedes and BMWs, because this feels cozy and it feels homey and warm, and it doesn't feel like technology is taking over from the artistic approach of the designers on the interior part.